What's up? Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile. We're going through, obviously, division by division, giving some off-season grades. AFC North and the AFC South today. We did AFC North and NFC South. We're kind of just like bouncing around here. We're going north-south, north-south, east-west, east-west next week. So bear with us as we go through all these. Kyle, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, dude. You know what? My wife has got a stuffy nose, runny nose. It might be post-Keys trip sickness that, I'm sure everybody on vacation understands being run down. My wife's got a little bit of that. It hit me this morning, but then I realized I got a 9:30 with Mike Renner, and we get to do some football, so I'm stoked to be here. We got some good first off the balls. We've got some good grades to come out. But you know what? Let's power through this week. These off-season weeks, they blend together after the draft. So let's just hold hands through these next couple months and get to training camp, buddy.
That is a good way to put it. They do kind of blend together. Once you get to like mid-May through the end of July, I'm always like, what day is it? Like, where is it? It's like,
what planet am I on?
Exactly. But it's not bad. I'm not going to complain any bit.
It makes me jealous of baseball because baseball is like, oh, Shohei Ohtani's playing again tonight. Aaron Judge is playing. I just watched him playing a doubleheader yesterday. We don't get that in football.
I can't imagine if you're like a true baseball reporter, like baseball analyst, how much work you have to do.
Oh,
you got every single day.
I never thought about that.
16 games or 15 games.
That's why there's only a small handful of trustworthy elite baseball media people.
Probably.
And you know what? On the same side of the coin there, the NBA, they play half the games that baseball does. But still, there's only a handful of guys that you really know or gals that are crushing it in the media space and are on top of it. Football, even an idiot like me can go watch one game and have a real take about something.
Because in football, I know just the landscape of, analysts. There's only 16 games, 17 games now. And there are a lot of people out there giving a lot of opinions that do not watch every single one, right? That are not going back and analyzing these things. So I can't imagine how much baseball and NBA suffer from similar sort of things. But I digress. Let's get to our first off the ball segment where
love this.
I'm curious to hear your take on this one. The Rams will be holding a veteran mini camp in Hawaii. Now it's only a few days, right? I think they get there as June 16th through June 19th. So just a couple days of practice, more of like a sort of ceremonial thing, I guess, or just like a fun trip. What are your thoughts on this? And do we see this becoming a thing around the NFL?
I think it's spectacular. It's hard to plan a family's calendar with, I'd imagine a lot of these guys have wives and kids. And springtime is nice because you're not in training camp, you're not in season, but you're also in that spot where you got to be in shape. Like, drug testers could show up and you've got to be at mini camp for a week. You got to be at vet mini camp. The OTA stuff takes a while. Let's just go to a destination. It's kind of the same thought process that a lot of these teams have implemented in training camp, which is obviously a longer stay. So the big money teams can afford to go to Napa or go somewhere nice if you're not necessarily in a great spot to have training camp, too hot, too humid, grueling conditions. This is perfect. I mean, springtime in Hawaii, and you're a West Coast team. So it's essentially just like going to the East Coast to do camp, but you're in Hawaii. So June 16th, the team's going to fly their families to Maui. I mean, sign me up, dude. I would almost take less money to play for a team like that goes and does something like that with a family situation. I just think it's sick. I wonder what your thoughts are, but they'll definitely have less guys missing, I assume.
I think this to me is indicative of what I think is going to be a larger trend that we see increasing around the NFL, which is similar to like elite universities, where elite universities almost have to sell their students on the lifestyle that they're going to get.
The experience. Right? It's not just the things that are taught anymore.
100%. You have to sell the kids as much as you do have to teach them. It's like a handshake in the hand sort of thing. So for the NFL, I think teams are realizing that hey, if we put together this environment where we're selling people to come here, say we spend, $5 or so million more dollars than everyone else. Well, we make that up on the back end by people wanting to take less to play for us, free agents wanting to come here and be in this environment. And it just helps your team out in the long run, as opposed to, the teams that try to pinch every penny. Well, then you got to pay your players a little bit more to stay there. Like, you end up losing that, I think, in the long run. So I think the Rams obviously see it. There's other teams throughout the NFL who have seen that. And
all the West Coast teams can go to Hawaii. All the East Coast teams, maybe they head down to the Caribbean. There's beautiful places. Logistically, obviously, the NFL can get anything done because their pockets are deep. But I'll tell you this. There's only a handful of football tweets that my wife references to me. Twitter's down, by the way. X was down this morning for me. There's only a handful of stories I hear about from my wife in the NFL every day. This will be one of them. I'll see her later today, and she's going to say, did you see that the Rams are going to Hawaii? I'm going to be like, yes. So there's that effect too. All the wives of players who are thinking about their new teams next year, they're gonna nudge their husbands a little bit and say, hey, well, I wonder if the Minnesota Vikings go to Hawaii, because Sean McVay and Les Snead, they take their guys out there.
Yeah. So I think it's shrewd, and I think it's only going to be a growing trend as we go forward. All right. Other thing in the first off the ball segment here. And I had a visceral reaction to this one when I saw it. Obviously, the Steelers traded George Pickens. The headline here is Alan Lazard in play to replace departed wide receiver in Pittsburgh.
This must be one of those botched Chat GPT headlines where they just sourced what potential suitors there are to be. Maybe they looked at height, weight, or something, and they were like, same player. These guys are both tall.
It's the Aaron Rodgers, his sort of entourage, right? When they signed with the Jets, remember they got like every single person who was like Aaron Rodgers adjacent.
Randall Cobb, Aaron Rodgers chef, Aaron Rodgers towel guy, Aaron Rodgers
John Kuhn almost came out of
retirement. The guy
who
carries the lighter around to make sure the incense are always burning.
But I had to look this one up. And when I saw it, I still couldn't believe it. Do you know what Alan Lazard's drop rate was in a New York Jets uniform?
It was not good, because that's why they stubbed their toe so hard in the first 6 weeks of the season, because on these conversion downs, sticks routes, a guy who's apparently seen a million balls from Aaron Rodgers looked like he'd never seen a football thrown from Aaron Rodgers. I don't know his drop rate. What is a bad drop rate? Let me ask you that.
Okay, that's great. That's a great question, because obviously these context. A bad drop rate, I would say anything over 8% is probably bad. 10% and above is like, just think about it. If 1 out of every 10 chances you're getting,
he's on 11.6.
He had 13 drops compared to only 60 catches, which was a 17.9% drop rate. Unbelievable.
Thank God he's such a big strapping figure. I mean, he's 6'5", 230 pounds. He looks open every single time. There's a reason that these quarterbacks are going back to the well to him, because he presents a great target. Mm-hmm. You got to bring the ball in, dude.
Yeah.
It's in the positional name.
For the Steelers, we're looking elsewhere. I have no interest.
I'll turn his ass into an X. He'll be an X plan O-line. He'll be out there just.
He could be Darnell Washington. He can do that for you.
Get him on that meal plan.
All right, that's our first off the ball segment. We're going to get to AFC North and AFC South offseason grades right after this.
The most original musical ever is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
I'm just giving the people what they want.
Better Man absolutely sizzles from start to finish. Better Man, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Cleveland Browns, first up here. Obviously, the last place team in the AFC North a year ago after making the playoffs back in 2023. Their offseason, obviously, a little quiet in terms of big name additions in free agency. They went kind of bargain bin shopping. No one got over $10 million a year on any of these deals. But Kenny Pickett, they traded for from the Eagles. Malik Collins, their highest priced guy, came over from, I believe, the 49ers, defensive tackle. He's probably, your biggest impact addition of all these guys, if I had to say. Lost Jameis Winston. They're a real ticker here, though, is retaining Myles Garrett and then the craziness that was their draft. Obviously, 2 quarterbacks in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, 2 running backs, Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, and then Mason Graham to kind of round out what should be and why I like this offseason. I mean, this defensive line should be back to kind of its 2023 form when it was good enough to pretty much in and of itself make them a playoff team. This defense is a lot of the same guys, especially on the back end, that was so good a couple years ago, but obviously had so many injuries last season. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this Browns offseason, because as much as it was nuts, as much as the draft was kind of shocking to a lot of people, I loved it. And I think given their cap situation, they couldn't have done too much better here.
I will say that I did love it. And I love their apprehension to jump the number 3 pick. And there was so much, or the number 2 pick with Shedeur Sanders. Can you even imagine the world we'd be living in right now if Shedeur was the 2 pick, the Browns completely botched it? I mean, it would be very Clevelandish. But
well, the crazy thing is,
this to me is great.
Would like the draft if they did that. I feel like more.
Yeah, but those people need to be admitted to drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers, maybe some deep, intensive shock therapy. Because what the Browns did was smart. And obviously that ticker item with Myles Garrett, he is your identity. He's a guy that's a winner down in, down out. The question mark I have is Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett coming into the fold. I saw a picture of him wearing 2 receiver gloves playing quarterback this morning. It's concerning. The hand stuff is concerning. And I know that Pittsburgh is cold, but it's even colder in Cleveland. Okay. Jameis Winston out the door hurts to me because not only are more people watching the Cleveland Browns when Jameis Winston is playing, but they're scoring more points. And there are receivers out there who are having 200-yard games. And that don't happen unless you got a guy with some juice. Jameis had some juice. Cornelius Lucas down the list at O-line additions. I got to play with Cornelius when he was young in the league. My God, he is like an oak tree. He is so big. His arms are so long. And he's cut really high. He doesn't have to be quick. He can move efficiently because of how long he is. He had a lot of snaps in Washington and played relatively well. He has gotten better in the National Football League, so they got a good one there. There is obviously going to be a lot of sting to that defensive front. And I was proud of the Browns was sticking to their DNA, getting a defensive tackle there. I also enjoyed listening to Mason Graham go through the number selection process in the Cleveland Browns building. He was like, what 90s numbers are available? And they're like, well, 95's taken. And the guy behind him was like, who's that? I was like, hey, buddy, just keep your mouth shut when you're in there. Let the big guy Mason do the talking, all right? So I like Mason Graham. One of my favorite looking people in the draft, because you look at him and you're like, he might be the chess club champion. And then you see him play football and you're like, he is playing chess out there and he's kicking some ass. Dylan Gabriel, ton of experience in college. I know you like to lean on guys with experience rather than the traits, these superhuman traits. I want a guy with experience. Dylan Gabriel has that. So between him and Shedeur Sanders, they've got a lot of good stuff there in value in round 4 and round 5. I'll go B+. Not quite an A because I got questions about receiver gloves, Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I do agree that the quarterback position, it's still one of the biggest unknowns of any team in the NFL. It could be one of the worst groups, and just like in terms of performance getting from it, you got 2 rookies, you got a first rounder who's never shown anything in Kenny Pickett, and then you have Deshaun Watson, who's probably just going to be told to stay home this year, and a 40-year-old Joe Flacco. It's like there is a good chance that it's not good at the quarterback position. But from where the Browns were, I love that they didn't just say, we're done after the Kenny Pickett move, or we're done after signing Joe Flacco or whatever. They just kept throwing shot after shot after shot. And hopefully one works, right? This gives yourself a better chance of some cream rising to the top. Now, it might not rise super high, and you still look like the 4th best team in this division. But should you catch lightning in a bottle? Should Shedeur live up to what?
Oh, man.
Should Gabriel, should you hit? All of a sudden, you're right back in the thick of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I feel like the floor is higher
Yes.
the basement is higher with the guys that they drafted, because
Yes.
you can say whatever you want about Shador off the field, but when he's on the field, he's pretty darn calm in the pocket. And he's a guy that will probably look to have a really high completion percentage. So you know what your basement's going to be there. With Dylan Gabriel, same thing. We know from watching Oregon, the ball's out. The guy doesn't take a lot of sacks, savvy, smart player. Joe Flacco's in the game. I mean, you could get a mixed bag of anything. You could get downtown Julie Brown a bunch of times a game, or you could just get the guy who's getting it out, depending on how his knees feel when he gets out of bed.
The problem is, though, I mean, with any offseason analysis, is that they had an F grade, what was it, 4 years ago when they traded for Deshaun Watson, and they're still paying for that sin because they got $167 million they got to give to him over the next
Stay home, Deshaun.
Only under contract for the next 2 years, but then the void years after that, they unfortunately, if he's not playing at Deshaun Watson level that we saw from Houston, you are screwed. You're just screwed when that's the case.
Why did he fall off so hard?
I have called it a mental thing. First,
he got the yips.
Well, it's not even just quarterback is a confidence position. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You have
it's
to,
like pitching.
That's what we talk about. Yeah. You have to go up there every single time when you're under center. And even if you don't feel like you're the man, you have to feel like you're the man, right? Even if you aren't completely confident you're going to get it done, you have to be completely confident. There has to be an irrationality to it. And I think he had that throughout Clemson, throughout his early years in Houston. But when you walk into every room and all of a sudden you're a pariah, all of a sudden you are not looked at like you're the guy. You're looked at like, stay away from that guy. You know, your perception has completely flipped on its head. I think mentally what that does to him is immeasurable. And then obviously added to that some injuries that have played a factor. And it's just like, he's just never coming back. I just don't think he's ever coming back. All right, Cincinnati Bengals.
They're coming back.
Who basically their job this offseason was to hold it in place, hold this offense in place. Obviously, extended Jamar Chase, re-signed T. Higgins, re-signed Mike Gesicki, re-signed BJ Hill. Some smaller additions. Tadaro Slayton comes over from the Packers to be a, pure nose tackle, a guy who can give you some first and second down snaps. Samaje Perine back in the fold there in Cincy. This one, though, it's the draft that kind of ruins it for me. I love what they did. The T. Higgins deal was a coup, in my opinion, because if he hit the open market, he was getting $35 million a year just because that's where the desperation was. He didn't come close to that.
He'd get 35 a mil just based on their Chargers game last Sunday Night Football last year. I mean, he went for like 200 off of a quad injury.
Yeah, he is. I mean, as far as big receivers around the NFL go, he's right up there at the top. I mean, with his skill set, his ability to separate at his size and his ball skills, it's like he is the perfect complement to Jamar Chase in that offense. And I just need, obviously, Jermaine Burton to be the other perfect complement with his speed. But getting those two intact for the foreseeable future, massive win. After that, though, there was nothing that they did that I liked. There was not a lot to write home about. So I went B- because I did think the Higgins deal in and of itself is like an A+ deal for the Cincinnati Bengals. But after that, I didn't like the draft. I've talked about it a bunch. I think we could be sitting here a year from now and looking at this draft class and saying, like, I don't know if they made any sort of impact whatsoever. And that's the problem, is that you needed that. You needed guys who can do something for you right now with how bad your defense is. And you got a lot more questions than answers, in my opinion.
Yeah, they've been bleeding out defensively. That's a reason why a Triple Crown winner and a MVP caliber quarterback with a two-headed monster receiver is not in the play. They weren't in the playoffs last year. Joe Burrow, who was, in my opinion, the best quarterback in football last year, was not in the playoffs. It feels to me like what my dad used to talk about Dan Marino. He would say, Kyle, you don't understand how good this guy was, and people will never give him the credit he's due, because they just didn't win Super Bowls. And unfortunately, with the defense bleeding out like they did last year, and the firings of coaches and Lou Anarumo out the door, who had the Chiefs by the balls a couple of years ago. You got to make immediate impacts in the draft. It's the only reason I don't give them an A. I'm going to give them a B+ because they got their guys signed. T. Higgins, it was stagecoach robbery. And obviously Jamar Chase, who I think is the best receiver in football. So you've got the two best guys in football, complemented with the best big guy in football currently in T. Higgins. Gesicki, Chase Brown. I mean, you find a way to continue to protect Joe, and you're going to be just fine. B+ for the Bengals.
All right, let's get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where a eventful offseason that still isn't done yet. Obviously, we think they're going to add Aaron Rodgers, but have not done that just yet. So they added Mason Rudolph. He is your penciled-in starter as of right now. Obviously made the big move for DK Metcalf, trading from the Seattle Seahawks for a second-round pick, and then just made the big move trading George Pickens away for a third and a fifth to the Dallas Cowboys. So swapping out number one wide receivers there, and then losing your entire quarterback room of Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, losing a couple offensive linemen. James Daniels obviously hurt last year, but Dan Moore at left tackle, they planned for that. They have 2 first-rounders that they drafted the past 2 seasons who will be filling in at tackle position, even if Altanu was hurt most of his rookie season. So TBD on how he'll fare. But a lot of moving parts here, but I think the core is still very much intact for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And I like their draft a little in that Derek Harmon was, I thought, a steal at 21, a perfect Steelers defensive lineman.
Yep.
The rest, you might
decade long, just glass eater.
Yes. And Caleb Johnson, a perfect scheme fit in the 3rd round, the Iowa running back. All that being said, though.
Jack Sawyer. You didn't even say Jack Sawyer. This guy terrorized the Oregon Ducks. Okay, I hated Jack Sawyer, and then I saw him get drafted by the Steelers in the 4th round, and I said, man, I can't wait to watch him play for that team.
He really is a Pittsburgh Steeler edge rusher. I'll say this, though. I gave him a C+. I thought this was a defining offseason in that you had to get over the hump. You had to improve. You were, a comfortable tier 2 behind the Ravens last year. You were not competitive for a Super Bowl. I still don't think you are. Now, you can bump this up a little bit if they get Aaron Rodgers, but it's just as it stands right now that you hitched your wagon to Aaron Rodgers. And all that comes with that, as we saw how that worked out with the Jets and their coaching staff and front office getting fired because of it.
Well, we have other theories about the head coach getting fired, but that's not a today pod topic.
We could have our own. We could have a conspiracy theory pod that would go off, but yeah. You just didn't get over the hump. Not only did you not get over the hump with this draft, I think you're taking a step back in this division, and I think there's a very good shot that the Bengals or the Browns pass you up next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even if it is Mason Rudolph, who I think has done a decent job when he's in there. I mean, you break it down more than I do, but Mason Rudolph is not necessarily the worst option in the world. He'll be all right. But if you're going to have Mason Rudolph, you better have all the other pieces there in front of you. And with obviously Dan Moore got a ton of money elsewhere, so they didn't have to pay up for Dan Moore, who led the league in sacks given up. He led the league in giving up sacks, I believe. James Daniels, you mentioned his injury history. He's still a younger player. He's now here with the Dolphins, I believe. Yep. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, look, it was good at times. It was never great. So it's the only way you just got to keep pulling that machine at the casino or at the, slot machine until you get what you like, unfortunately. And what they like right now is a guy who has yet to commit anywhere. There's been obviously a stalemate in conversations, and things are just going to be pushed all the way up to training camp. It's no place you want to be as a football team when you don't know who your leader is, because the leader sets the tone for what the culture is. The culture sets the tone for what kind of team you're going to be and how the season will play out. And without a true leader there, unless Mason Rudolph's the guy who's grabbed it by the reins, but how much does it change when Aaron Rodgers shows up?
I don't know, because this is not a good receiving core. You went from what I thought could be good.
Yep. If they got along.
Yeah. to now just DK Metcalf. And we've seen how Aaron Rodgers fares when like he doesn't trust other options, because Brandon Hollum in the chat brings up a good point. It's like, it's Robert Woods, it's Ben Skoranek, Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson, who they didn't trust to play at all last year, Calvin Austin, who's 5'8". Like, it's a receiving core that has really one guy, one interesting gadget guy in Calvin Austin, and then Rodgers won't be throwing the ball to anyone else is the worry. You know, we saw it in New York. We saw it towards the end in Green Bay. It's just like, I am very worried about what the Steelers offense is going to look like, especially given how Rodgers was not healthy last year. You don't stay healthy at 41 years old. It's just hard to.
So Arthur Smith is going to have to really get groovy with it. He's going to really have to.
Well, they're going to run the ball a lot. I think that's going to be the emphasis. But then you don't have.
But if you are throwing the football, you're going to need some great schemes to be able to get a lot of these guys open. It's not like you're dealing with the Jackson 5 out there.
So for all those reasons, I'm a little worried about the Steelers.
I give them a C. I go harder than you. Yeah.
Baltimore Ravens, last one, your AFC North champs from a year ago. A very status quo offseason in terms of free agents. They just retained, kept Ronnie Stanley there on the roster, added Nuke Hopkins. At this point in his career, if you watched him in KC or Tennessee last season, you know he is a spot route specialist. The guy is not getting open on his own anymore. He just doesn't have the juice. It is gone, but still has great ball skills, obviously. And Lamar Jackson, we'll see if they pair well together. I bet he barely plays much, if at all, in that offense. The key loss, Patrick McCarry, kind of your versatile guy in the interior there who can play some tackle as well. That one hurts a little bit, but I love this draft. It was one of my favorite drafts, and it's an immediate impact draft too. I think Malachi Starks, Mike Green, year one, could both be in contention for Rookie of the Year with what I saw from them on tape last season. So I thought they added more in the draft than anyone. I thought they did well to stay where they were atop this division in terms of keeping everyone in the fold. I went A-. It wasn't spectacular, but it was kind of business as usual for the Baltimore Ravens, and this is how you be the Baltimore Ravens.
Pat Ricard, Ronnie Stanley, Ben Cleveland. Leadership. OGs, guys you need in the room. And with, I've played with guys that played with Lamar Jackson. And Orlando Brown Jr. in Kansas City, when he was in Kansas City, we would talk about, we compare some of the Mahomes stuff to Jackson. And, this is like whisper conversations. I'd be like, how would he handle that? And Lamar seems like so much fun to play with, such a badass, backyard football, tough as nails. But I still think it helps having a guy like Ronnie Stanley in the building and Pat Ricard. Not only that, but schematically having a fullback, you can do so much. And with the way that the Baltimore Ravens want to operate on offense, I think it's beautiful that they were able to retain those guys. You mentioned the two picks, round one, round two, Malachi Starks and Mike Green. Mike Green had a lot of red flags. Apparently he was very open with the Baltimore Ravens because, and this is a lesson for young players. And I'll give you the solo cam here for a second, Harry. If you're a young player and you've gone through something in your life that is regrettable, that maybe put a stain on your reputation or your name, you're embarrassed about it, maybe you had some criminal issue. When you go in for interviews, they're going to know all this stuff. So if you hide it, you look even worse than you did before you came in the room. But if you did it like Mike Green did it, when you went and spoke with the Baltimore Ravens and you were open and honest about it, chances are these teams are going to give you an opportunity or a second chance. Not all of them. Some people draw a hard line in the sand. I played in Chicago. Character was at the top of the list for George McCaskey and their operation. But some of these teams, they just want great football players, and they think they can rely on their leadership to mold you into the man they want you to be. So be honest throughout this process. That's what I got there, Mike. Malachi Starks, great player. We had him slotted to be a Baltimore Raven. He feels like a Baltimore Raven. And that division, you're going to have to confuse and cause chaos for opposing quarterbacks. The other guy, Mike Green, we talked about the character, but he can rush that passer, man. So get after Josh Allen at the line of scrimmage, get after Joe Burrow at the line of scrimmage and confuse and cause chaos on the back end and plug them in with that freak back there, Kyle Hamilton, and a lot of great stuff will happen.
Yeah, I think what you said there was good advice for not just guys entering the NFL, but just anyone at any point in life. If you've made a mistake and you want to act like it didn't happen, you are going to come off looking bad. You have to own up to it. That is how you progress in life. So just some good, very good advice there. All right, we're going to take a quick break. That's your NFC North. We get to the AFC South. Right after this. Tennessee Titans. All right. So I couch it with this. Obviously, it's a transformative offseason in that you added Cam Ward. But it's not like I'm grading the decisions here. That, to me, was a layup. You had Will Levis for 2 years. You did not make progression from year 1 to year 2 the way you'd like for a franchise quarterback. So you take the guy who is the only one that everyone had graded as a franchise quarterback. Everyone, but like most people had graded as a franchise quarterback. So I can't give him too much credit for that. But again, it is a transformative offseason because of that. The decisions outside of that, I am worried. Now, it was a beggars can't be choosers sort of situation in free agency with this offensive line class. We discussed it at the time. That didn't mean, in my opinion, that you really had to break the bank for someone like Dan Moore Jr., who, as you alluded to so eloquently earlier, he led the NFL in sacks allowed last season. He's an upgrade from Nicholas Petit-Frere, but he is not an upgrade in terms of you're going to feel great about your offensive line after adding this guy. Kevin Zeitler, good budget signing, but there's a reason he's a budget signing because he's over 35 years old at this point, and you just history of guys in that at that age, unreliable. So I thought they had an okay offseason in terms of what they did to add around him. I thought they got some good steals in the draft. It was a great draft because obviously you added Cam Ward, but in terms of just decision making around it, I went B-. I thought they were in a position to do a little bit more because I'm still looking at this offensive line. I'm still looking at this receiving core, and I'm saying we've done a lot. We've made a lot of moves, but it could still be really bad. You know, when your number 2 and number 3 wide receivers are either a 32-year-old Tyler Lockett, a Van Jefferson who is bounced around the journeyman at this point, who's never lived up to a second-round billing, and then a bunch of day 3 wide receivers and tight ends, I just worry that it might not be necessarily good enough for a guy like Cam Ward to hit the ground running and not have some hiccups.
I want to say this about Dan Moore Jr. before people think I'm just here to say mean things, because context is really important, particularly as an offensive line. You know, I could give up 3 sacks in a game, and of course at the podium I would say, you know, I got to be better with my hands or blah, 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 blah. But you might look at the tape and the quarterback might be at 12 yards, or the receiver ran the wrong route and the quarterback had to pat the football for an extra second. And sometimes you can't hold up for 5 seconds. Dan Moore Jr. played one of the toughest slates of edge rushers that you're going to play in the National Football League. Guys like Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, they just kept coming. They're werewolves. And sometimes you get in those divisions, you get in those fights, and your football team gets down. You got to throw it a lot, and things don't work out well. I mean, I think he was 145th out of like 161 in terms of pressure rate. But I do weigh into that equation how talented the rushers are that he's playing week in, week out. I do not think that he's going to be looking at the same caliber of rushers. In fact, the scary guys in that division are probably on the interior of his defensive line. So he's going to get to see them day in, day out as well. I wish him nothing but the best. I'm excited for Cam Ward. It was a layup and a slam dunk in my opinion. And I'm looking forward to watching this Titans team. I'm going to give him a B. I would give him B-, but I'm weighing into the Dan Moore equation, who he played against.
Yeah, I do think, obviously, that duo of Hendrickson and Garrett, difficult, not quite, Josh Hines Allen, Will Anderson, Latu doesn't have quite the same juice, I'll say. So that perspective is life will be easier. And also
we got to think positive as alignment here is what I'm
Yes.
saying. Because if you just think about them making a porno tape every time you're on the field, because they're just getting sacks and hits and it's all positive. We got to flip it a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. But it's more not to say damn more, but it's more than the money paid, right? You didn't have to go to that number, in my opinion.
It's bad
to address it to that level, right? Like we talked about Jalen Moore with the Chiefs and how he could very well be as good as Dan Moore is for the Tennessee Titans. They got him for, 2/3 the price. So that's why I worry. And again, even if he hits, even if, he is playing better because he's not facing as tough competition, it's not like you're getting high level tackle play still. It's not like he's all of a sudden Lane Johnson out there, unfortunately. So your O-line could still be a big issue for you this upcoming season. That's all. B-. Jacksonville Jaguars up next, who had in James Gladstone's first season as GM a very different offseason, kind of one that they're trying to make up for all the mistakes of last GM, right? Of the previous regime, cutting Gabe Davis, letting Christian Kirk go, letting Andre Cisco go. I don't think they're going to feel too many of those. Cisco maybe, but he was kind of an up and down player on the back end that isn't for every scheme. I'm sure added a lot, and they went kind of budget shopping to try to just build out and give you a baseline for this roster. Patrick McCarry, versatile interior offensive lineman. Jordan Lewis, quality slot corner. De'Ami Brown, capable number 3 type of wide receiver. Chuma Adoga, swing backup offensive lineman. Didn't pay a lot of money, but I think kind of just raised the floor. And
that's
a lot
value.
Of positions. And needed to do that because, again, you gave up a lot of picks when you went up and went for Travis Hunter. But now you have maybe the best 1-2 punch in the NFL at the wide receiver position. I think it's possible. I mean, we talked about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase in that mold or in that realm. I think there's a good chance that this one outpaces them. Maybe not year one.
We got, you know what?
Hey,
I got to pump the ABS brakes. If we're sitting there in the driver's ed car and I'm sitting in the left seat and you're driving, I'm slamming on the instructor pedal right now.
Did you ever
We
have
got a lot of ball. We got a lot of ball ahead of us before I even mention these two, BTJ and Travis Hunter Jr., in the same conversation with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, because them boys are, hey, man. I watched them play the other day against the Chargers. Those guys can go. And they lost, but they can go. McPherson, 3 missed field goals, pulled them. Do you remember that?
Evan had
so
a bad
brutal.
year. Brian Thomas Jr. was 6th in the NFL as a rookie in receiving yards.
Hey, awesome. But the issue is there's 2 positions next to Travis Hunter's name. And in fact, on that graphic that Harry in the production truck put up there, you see in the draft it says CB/WR. I would invert that. I would flip those. Big WR, tiny CB is what I would put. And if that's the case, or if it's just WR, I am wholesale buying what you're selling on that 1-2 punch. But we got a lot of days left before we see what the hell they're going to do with Travis Hunter.
I did love the draft. Wyatt Milam, after that, a guy we both loved out of West Virginia, the offensive tackle. I think he could very well take over from Ezra Cleveland at left guard early in his career. Bashul Tutin adds a different element in terms of the speed he brings to the table in that offense. Not to say that Travis Etienne's slow, but watch Tutin and you'll understand. So I think what they did to give just Trevor Lawrence a situation that's good, right? We've kind of been begging for it since he was drafted. It's like, how can we just not make this the Jaguars offense, right? How can we not make this dog shit? And I think they finally did it. So hats off to James Gladstone. I can't stop saying that because there's a Duval Street in Key West every single time.
They're all Jags and Dolphins fans in Key West.
But yeah, that Duval clip lives in my head. I can't stop saying it.
And then he gets pissed when people are like, hey, can you do the Duval? He's like, no. Come on, man. That was your introductory press conference. Like, come on.
Come on, Liam. All right. A- for the Jags.
B+.
Indianapolis Colts very much had one goal in mind this offseason. It was improve the secondary. Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum, they went out, big money, spent it, needed it. You watched them at all last year. You knew this was the issue, and I think they fixed it wholesale. Like, you upgraded the safety position across from Nick Cross that needed to get upgraded. You upgraded the corner position. across from Jalen Jones that needed to be upgraded. Now you have depth. Now you have capable starters. And now you have a new defense coordinator in Lou Anarumo that when he had those defenses that were capable of shutting down
nightmare
homes of the world, they had versatile, deep secondaries. Because what he wants to do is basically a game plan. He's a game plan DC. He's not the way Gus Bradley was, previous DC, who was a single high sort of DC. You know, he had his types of coverages that he liked to play. Lou Anarumo, week in and week out, you will see, you'll see a cover 3 game from him. You'll see a man cover game from him. You'll see a drop 8 game from him. Like, you'll see certain game plans based off of what he thinks he wants to take away from opposing teams. And when you do that, when you play a bunch of stuff, you need smart guys in your secondary. You need smart, versatile players. And so I can see why that was their point of emphasis this offseason. Now, I do worry that the offensive line, you lost 2 guys, didn't necessarily backfill, lost Will Fries, lost Ryan Kelly. Now, they were hurt, banged up last year, so you already had to throw out Matt Goncalves in there. You already had to throw out some Tanner Bortolini in there. So guys who got some run that you're now plugging in. But I liked it. I liked it on the whole for the Colts. I thought their draft, you hit a lot of doubles. I'm not sure any home runs, but I think a lot of those guys are going to be impact players for you. So all that being said, I went B+. B+ for Indianapolis Colts.
Best way to help your young quarterback, obviously, is to just become an offensive line farm. You mentioned Fries and Kelly out the door, and that sucks for the Colts. But you immediately put the pacifier in the mouth of that fan who's complaining because you draft Tyler Warren. And he's somebody that you and I both think is a real special player, and I'm excited to watch him play. And we said, if you're the Colts, you're looking for a tight end. I had Colston Loveland mocked to the Colts just because I wanted somebody in the vision of this young quarterback to try to help him out day in, day out. And with Tyler Warren, you get that, and you get some more versatility. And with the style of offense that I anticipate them running, with a healthy horse at quarterback, they're going to be able to mix in some of these packages where it's, Big Five and Warren back there. And it's going to be scary for defenses to prep for that. Anybody can have the ball at any time. I'm excited to watch this group.
And I kind of, as much as the Daniel Jones signing was a little bit more than I would have liked to have spent, I like that it's going to push Anthony Richardson. I do think, getting a vet in that building who is capable of starting, however, whatever you think about Daniel Jones, I think we could say that. He's going to push Anthony Richardson. It basically put him on notice to say, we need the best from you this offseason. I think you're going to get the best from him. It's just how good is that best from Anthony Richardson remains to be seen, because we just haven't seen the guy play a bunch of football at this point in time. Last team here, Houston Texans. Loved their draft. Loved their draft. Hated what they did with this offensive line. Now, you could say that this gave him more cap flexibility to get rid of Laramie Tunsil. It gave him more picks. They needed, obviously, it was bad when Laramie was there, so they went with just throwing a bunch of other guys at this problem. But, man, I do not feel confident saying that they improved this offensive line whatsoever, given the names they added. Obviously, they signed Cam Robinson, signed Laken Tomlinson, traded for Ed Ingram, signed Trent Brown. They threw the kitchen sink at it, drafted Ariante Ursary in the second round out of Minnesota. One of the more I'd call NFL-ready offensive tackles, just in terms of how much football he's played. But all that, and you still could stink. I'm looking at it on paper. If you're starting fives, Cam Robinson, Tyus Howard, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, Blake Fisher, there's a chance it's still very, very bad.
Yep.
And
there's a chance a number of those guys aren't on the field in week 6.
Yes. So that's my worry, because, you kind of shot the moon last year. I think from a cap perspective, they weren't going to go out and go on another spending spree. I think getting CJ Gardner-Johnson, this defense will be scary. It's already was a year ago, and now I think you upgraded at defensive tackle a little bit to get even more out of that group. It should be a very good unit.
This is Dan Moore's nightmare game.
But I look at this offensive line. I'm like, I don't think you're getting through the AFC with this offensive line. I just don't think you are, unfortunately. I love what they did at wide receiver. They got weapons for Stroud. he's going to need them because that ball is going to have to get out of his hands.
Year 1 to year 2 production obviously dropped for CJ Stroud. He was, over the moon his first year. And then the second year he came back down to earth. And a lot of that wasn't due to his shortcomings. It was protection based. They were getting assaulted. The backfield was getting assaulted in Houston. The first move they made was getting rid of Ronnie Stanley to another young quarterback who's going to just eat that up and turn it into production immediately. The question mark was the O-line. Did they do enough? Yeah, they did a lot, but I'm not sure it was the right moves. These are all essentially gambles, all these guys. I mean, all the names that you named, they haven't been great, so, and a lot of them haven't been healthy. And one of them's got weight issues. So there's a lot to digest, no pun intended, with the Houston moves this offseason. I love watching CJ Stroud play so much. And when he's good, he is fun football to witness. So let's hope that the offseason moves, and I give him a C+, are better than we are judging them for right now, because nothing's better when that defense in Houston is humming and CJ Stroud is slinging it around the yard.
Yeah, I do think their defense, the secondary, is still one of, if not the best in the NFL. They're still going to be a chore to pass against consistently with that edge duo, with that secondary. But they had games where they just couldn't move the football. And now obviously he's swapped out OCs. No more Bobby Slowick. I think that will help just in terms of CJ Stroud's comfortability. But I'm worried. I'm worried about his health, truthfully. It's what it is. It's like that guy can't keep taking that many hits. You just can't. No one can in the NFL, unfortunately. 52 sacks a year ago. All right. B- for me. Houston Texans. You want C+. And I don't. It's tough.
I just don't like the names that they got for the O-line.
It is tough because this is like year 3, year 4 of your rookie deal. That's the window, right?
Yep.
That's your sweet spot. That's what.
This is really not how he saw it going.
Exactly.
After his first year, he's like, I'm going to build on this. We'll be in the Super Bowl in year 3. And now here we are. So
there you have it. Your off-season grades for the AFC North, AFC South.
Get your mothers and your wives flowers. Get them something. Just call them. Do something. Be nice. Okay? They made you.
Great advice there from a seasoned vet in the game. All right. We'll be back next week. NFC East, NFC West, AFC East, AFC West. Till then, thanks for tuning in. Keep pushing.
Peace.